welcome everyone who's here. Thank you so much for joining. This is the Symposium, Careers for Linguists, Linguists for Careers, organized by the Linguistics Beyond Academia Special Interest Group of the Linguistics Society of America. I'll be moderating our first panel today. My name is Alexandra Johnston. I'm currently the Director of the Masters in Language and Communication program in the Department of Linguistics at Georgetown University. Before that, I spent most of my career outside of academia, as have most of our panelists who will be here today. I worked as a corporate trainer and as a nonprofit leader. My colleague Laurel Sutton is also here. She's our session organizer, and she will be moderating our chat today, along with other members of our special interest group. Looks like Emily is in the chat and getting us started with a very interactive chat. So just quickly to let you know about the Linguistics Beyond Academia Special Interest Group. This is a special interest group that provides information, guidance, and resources for linguistics students and faculty who are curious about job opportunities and career paths for people with training in linguistics, and who want to know about careers outside of academia. So if you've ever asked yourself, or you've been asked, what can you do with a linguistics degree, then you're in the right place. We've organized 3 panels today as part of this symposium, and they feature linguists who have forged careers for themselves in 3 very broad sectors: government, technology, and nonprofit organizations. And this is just to give you a sampling of the wide variety of careers and job opportunities that linguists can be quite competitive for with the training and skills that we have. Our first panel, featuring linguists who work in government, will run until the top of the hour, and then we'll have a 10-minute break to reset and get ready for our next panel on technology and phonetics. So this isn't going to be a research presentation symposium per se. It's going to be a collection of career stories, and you'll take away some tips about job seeking strategies, about ways to position and frame your skills that show employers outside of academia the value that you can bring to their organizations. And this is also your opportunity to learn from these linguists. Where are these jobs? How can I apply to them? What kind of skills do you need? What kind of training? So please pepper the chat with your questions, and we'll make sure that we ask our panelists what you're interested in. We'll also be posting resources and links in the chat as well. So you'll also take away a folder of resources that we've put together for you to help you in your job search or get you going thinking about ideas for your career path. I'd like to ask each panelist to start with a short 1 to 2 minute introduction. I will start with Tanner Call, then I'll go on to Hillary Harner, and I'll round up with Cecilia Castillo Ayometzi. So Tanner, I'm going to start with you, and I'd like to ask you to let us know your linguistic background. What degree do you have? What areas of linguistics did you specialize in? Where are you working currently? What's your position and scope of work?
Yeah, sounds great. So like Alex said, my name is Tanner Call. I got my undergraduate degree in linguistics, and then I got my master's degree at Georgetown at the program that Alex oversees. It's the Master's in Language and Communication. And I actually just graduated in 2019, so I am a recent graduate. But ever since I graduated, I have been working for the FBI in the language testing and assessment unit. So there I started as a contract language rater, and I've kind of taken on a few other roles and responsibilities over the past year or so. But the scope of my work, like I said, when I first started out, I was essentially part of a team that would help rate and assess examinees' language proficiency. So if the FBI or if the government needed somewhat to test someone's foreign language abilities. Sorry, there's my dog right there. She really likes the window. Sorry about that. So I would essentially, when examinees take a battery of tests to test their proficiency in a foreign language, whether that's speaking, translating, writing, things like that, I'm part of the team that assesses those tests to assign an ILR score, the Interagency Language Roundtable score, which, if some of you are familiar with government work, you're familiar with that scale. But beyond doing language rating and assessment, my roles have expanded to do some sociolinguistic qualitative work as well, which I can discuss a little bit later. But it's a pretty wide scope of work. And like I said, I'm a recent graduate, but it's been good work so far.
Great, thank you so much, Tanner. It's a great introduction. Hillary, can I throw to you, please?
Yeah. Hi, Hillary Harner. Nice to be chatting kind of with you guys. So yeah, I received my degree I finished it in 2016. I did a PhD also at Georgetown. I was in theoretical linguistics. I did semantics. And if you know semantics, I worked on modality, which is kind of niche. So after that, I was like, okay, where am I going to get a job? So I got a 1-year contract at Google. So I went out to California. I worked there for a year, learned a lot about like the tech world, Silicon Valley, Google itself, what software engineers actually know about language or don't know. And then I wanted to find a job that kind of needed a little bit more of what I knew from my PhD. So went on a job hunt for a few months, and I found this postdoc that I'm in right now, and I'm at the Naval Research Lab. So all of the military branches of the government have research labs devoted to them to work on their technology. So I'm in the AI section of the Navy's research lab, where I'm in a pretty interdisciplinary group. So I do kind of more cognitive science, basic research. And basically the idea is to, help build up general knowledge about human cognition for people who are working on AI. They need to know, if you want good AI, it has to look like humans. So you need to know how the humans think, and that's what I'm doing now.
That's so interesting. I can't wait to follow up. Thank you, Hillary. I'm going to turn now to Cecilia Castillo Ayometzi. Do you mind introducing yourself, please, Cecilia? And please take yourself off mute.
Thank you. So I'm Cecilia Castillo Ayometzi, and I am currently a Senior Workforce Diversity and Compliance Officer. I know the title sounds very fancy, but it has to do with policy analysis and monitoring of compliance. I have a master's and doctoral degrees in linguistics with a concentration in sociolinguistics at Georgetown University. My interest and my current research and work has been, and since I was a student, with theories of discourse analysis, narrative analysis, interaction and sociolinguistics, critical discourse analysis, and mediated discourse analysis. My training and my work has been influenced by the work of Ron Scollon, who was my mentor in graduate school, and his theories of mediated discourse analysis, nexus analysis, and intercultural communication. I got to experience the beginnings of geosemiotics and the study of linguistic landscapes, which I actually get to apply in my work. And I enjoyed the exposure to Crescent Van Leeuwen's research on multimodality and analysis of visual design and multimodal discourse analysis. The scope of my work is very big. It's still within linguistics, which is very nice. My main job is to demystify the conceptualization of language in this sector. Instead of taking it as a code, I always apply it as a complex semiotic system. The linguistics that are relevant to my work has to do with the importance of ethnography, analysis of interaction. I have a very robust toolkit that allows me to provide expertise and guidance on text and messaging to reach different migrant communities. The linguistic landscape work of Elana Shohami and Jackie Liu has been relevant also to my work. I have done a creative implementation of very unorthodox application of engagement in the community using appropriating cultural tools and discourse analysis and so far. I focus primarily on the human interaction. I see it as a community practice as opposed to see these monolithic group categories. Right now in my work, I am focusing on anti-discrimination in Title VI and policies that are based on protected categories such as race, color, and national origin. And that kind of demystification is very important to see those groups as a community of practice.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's good to hear all of these familiar names and references to our mentors' work. Great. So thank you for giving us that brief introduction on behalf of all three of you. I'd like to turn now to exactly how you found those first jobs post-graduation. We heard briefly about which jobs you've taken, but how exactly did you find those opportunities and turn them into a position, if you know what I mean? Tanner, could you tell us how you learned about the position as a contract rater, contract tester with the Language Testing and Assessment Unit at FBI?
Yeah, for sure. So I found out about the job. I was in my last semester at Georgetown, and the MLC, the linguistics department, had been putting on, like they always do, a variety of, I don't remember what they're called, but essentially they're career panels where different people who had connections to Georgetown's linguistics department would come in and give presentations about, what they're doing, something somewhat similar to this. Back then it was all in person. It seems so long ago, but so there was just quite a few. I think it was every month or every other month, someone would come in and talk about the work that they do. And there happened to be one month, the unit chief of the language testing and assessment unit and another employee, they both came in to give a presentation, and they also talked about how they were currently at the time looking for people to fill the contract language rating position. So after the presentation, I went and talked to them, got business cards. I think I connected via LinkedIn. And then it kind of just went from there. I went in, did an interview, and got the job, and it's been going since then.
And so it was pretty lucky that you had this personal connection, this in-person interaction with the head of the language testing and assessment unit. But otherwise, these jobs would be posted publicly, as federal jobs are, on the FBI website. Would they also be posted in usajobs.gov? How else could you find out about these open positions as contract testers and raters?
That's a really good question. Because it's a contract position, it's not an actual government employee. You're an independent contractor. I'm not sure where it would be posted. I'm trying to think back. Most of the people who work as contract raters right now have some sort of personal or professional connection with someone in the in our unit. So it's a lot of networking. I know sometimes that can be good, that can be bad for people, but that's how I think the majority of people that currently work as contract language raters in our unit have found the position.
Good. Thanks so much, Tanner. And currently you're also working on getting a security clearance as well through this contract position, right?
Yeah, so it did require partially, some of the work required a security clearance. I did get the security clearance, but I'm kind of in another process right now as well. So there's a little bit more to do with it. But yeah, you can do a lot of the work without a security clearance, but kind of the end goal for the unit chief wants everyone to down the line have a security clearance.
Yep. And that's a really valuable qualification to have, for sure. Good way to get it through this contract position. Hillary, if I could turn to you, I'm really curious how you found out about your first job post-graduation, which was at Google, this one-year position that you held. How did you learn about it, and how did you apply?
Yeah, Google, well, Linguists List is basically the answer to how I found both my jobs, very indirectly for the second one, my current one. But Linguists List, Google had posted that they were looking for linguists, and I saw that, and I thought, well, you know, this looks like a good job. I was getting a little bit just exhausted at the end of grad school, because that's what happens when you do a PhD, as we know. So I thought, okay, this doesn't look like, I'm not sure this would really be a thing I'd want to do long term, but you know, it's just like a little year gig, and to kind of learn some stuff, I'll apply to this. So yeah, I think Google's kind of interesting, just because like they don't need a cover letter from you, and it's very, I'm very like much trained to want to write a cover letter, but I think mostly I just sent an email, and then eventually, you know, I guess they weren't looking, or it got filled sooner than, you know, I had responded. So I didn't hear back from them for months, which was kind of okay, because I wasn't ready anyway. And then when I did hear back from them, they're like, oh, sorry about the holdup. You know, are you still interested? So I said yes. And then they sent me like a test that I took and it was a lot of like basic theoretical linguistics, like syntax, semantics. I think maybe there were some phonetics. I think it was mostly syntax and semantics. And they just give you novel sentences that you're never going to talk about in class, just because they're weird, but it's typical stuff that they're used to seeing at Google. So you fill out tests, demonstrate that you can think like a linguist. And then, yeah, that's how I got that job.
That ties in so well to our next panel, which will talk about that process of applying to a tech position. So thank you so much for foreshadowing this kind of application procedure.
Yeah.
You know, but then Hillary, why did you want to make that shift from Google to the Naval Research Lab?
I think you don't, at the time, I know that they've sort of shifted what linguists do at Google now, but at the time I felt like a PhD was kind of above and beyond what you really needed to do most of the work. So I wanted to find a job that wanted me to have a PhD, and I wasn't expecting that they wanted me to have a linguistics PhD, but I thought I can sell it to them. I've been at Google now. I know, you know, kind of what the state of the art is in the tech world. So I think I have some confidence now that I can sell myself to other people on like, here's why you need linguistics. You didn't know this, but you needed me. So I went on, I kind of had this idea that I would just like build this program for what I would do at a company. Like I would just cold call them and be like, you didn't know this, but you need a linguist, and here's everything I can do. So I started to make this just big list of people who work on language, companies that work on language, because I got this impression that most of these companies do not have any linguists working for them. So I started to make this really big list, and then I, you know, supplemented it by just going through linguist lists, just going like through the years. I was looking at like who has hired linguists, who knows that linguists exist, who's looking to hire them. So I made this giant list, and then I found, I think this is the way it happened, I don't totally remember, but I found this posting from the Naval Research Lab, and it was years ago. But I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that there was any military research labs. But I found that, I thought, okay, that's interesting. So then I Googled around, and I went to NRL's actual webpage, and I found this one guy who was like a section head. He actually had a degree in linguistics, a PhD. And I was like, oh, wow, like he's the guy I should be emailing. So this was the first place that I cold called. I just sent an email, and I was like, hi, I worked as a linguist, and here's how helpful linguists are in companies. I can give you actual stats of how we helped improve Google search. Like, you know, you should hire me. I see you're a linguist, so, you know, you have some confidence in this, I'm sure. And I got an email back within like an hour, and the guy was like, he became my boss. He said, oh, you know, Dennis doesn't work here anymore, but I'm the section head. He's not the section head anymore. But yeah, I'd like to interview you. You know, when do you want to meet? Like, I can meet this week if you want. So of this massive list of all these places I had compiled, I never went any further into the list because I had an interview with him, and it seemed like a cool opportunity. And yeah, so that's how I got it.
I love that you took that chance, Hillary, that you did the cold email pitch, and that it worked so well for you. That is one of these pathways to a position. that's fantastic. I mean, even without knowing anybody there, you were able to present your skills in such a way using, you know, quantitative measures, using data that showed what you could offer of value to this employer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That's what a great career story. Cecilia, I'm going to turn to you now and find out from you, how did you find your first job in local government, right?
Yes. So it's very interesting because my story is very different. I was actually offered the job, and I was invited to the Office of Latino Affairs, which is part of the Executive Office of the Mayor. And right there, they say, would you be interested to work with us? You have the job, which was shocking. But let me tell you a little bit of how that came about. So I didn't look for a job. I was not looking for a job, but through my training and while I was a student at Georgetown, I actually did a lot of volunteer work because of my interest. So actually, I was very much interested in the different linguistic minorities living in the US. So during my graduate training, I volunteered a lot with different organizations as an interpreter, teacher. I did research for the Department of Human Services. During the sniper attacks, I actually interviewed people and we wrote a report on it. And then that kind of exposed me to know individuals working in that area. So workers or non-profit organizations or government. And I guess one of the things was that in a way I was applying my skills. I was very much training to ethnographic work on undocumented immigrants. And so actually my skill set of knowing a language and being a bilingual individual also helped, but mostly my linguistic toolkit. Realistically, all the choices of what I ended up here or my current career really reflects the choices and the opportunities that I took. I always work on issues of social justice because I was interested on that. I was very much influenced by the work of Ron. So I knew what I wanted and I got involved in what I wanted. And this opportunity to work outside academia or outside the environment of the university gave me immediately the opportunity to, after I finished my PhD, to work with these organizations. And as I said, somebody at the Office of the Mayor actually called me and asked me to come and visit them. And I talked to them, they introduced me to everybody. The director right there said, we want to hire you. And I didn't know what to say. I'm not looking for a job. So I actually went back to my mentor and I told him, what do you think? I don't know, I want to be in academia, I want to be a professor. And he said to me, give it a try. If you don't like it, you can go back. It has been 16 years that I took that step. So that's always very important. However, I have been in positions of hiring people. I have hired a lot of individuals and a lot of people come with PhDs, masters, and so far. I can give you an advice that actually I got to see, and that is that we have a very important toolkit that is ethnography. So take your job search as an ethnographic piece of work. You need to actually, in the terms of Riley, you know the know-how. So imagine that you are about to enter a different community of practice. So you need to know how it works, find out how the process of hiring is, check the human resources. There is a lot in the case of WMATA, which is a big organization. There is a department on talent acquisition that specializes in hiring individuals that belong to minority groups, such as women, LGBTQ individuals, visually impaired individuals, individuals with disabilities. So there are departments, complete departments that are searching for individuals that belong to those different communities, and especially high-level skilled individuals, which would have PhDs or law degrees or master's degree. So take it as an ethnography, find out how the institution work. Be careful also how you approach people. I always get people approaching me as if I were able to give them a job. I can't. Also, learn the appropriate process. You don't do a cold message telling, I have received cold messages when they say, oh, I want to meet you because you're a wonderful sociologist. So do a little bit of research and know how to reach out to people. The other thing that I can tell you is the first job outside the academic environment is the hardest. Once you get in, you will have the opportunity to build your career. And the other thing that I want to remind you is, do not just take any job. Take one that you would enjoy. You may not get it immediately, but at least seek it. And seek something that has to do with you, with what you bring. Take your work life as a journey, and the direction of your journey is marked by what you like to try, what you would like to do. And begin with a job that is in the step and going into the right direction of your interests and desires. I always remember Ron telling me, don't just take any job, you become what you do. And if you don't like your job and you hate your job, you will hate yourself. And sometimes that happens to us when we had to work, because in graduate school, sometimes people need to do some sort of job, and then you become an expert, and that's the only possibility that you have when you finish. So in my case, I was lucky to seek what I really wanted to do and to know people, and then people, I guess, were interested in me and then literally offered me the job. My decision was whether or not to go in that direction or not.
I think what you're highlighting too, Cecilia, is that in terms of finding a job that suits your interests, is that you went about it through such a rich, building off of a rich personal history of volunteering, of following those interests that were so close to your heart, of working with refugee, migrant, undocumented immigrant communities in the Washington, D.C. area. And because you were doing things that you were so interested in, working on social justice issues in the community, you naturally, as a result of those actions, met people who then were able to, connect you with these other opportunities that never crossed your mind.
And also to add to that, the fact that you're doing something that you enjoy and that is matches your interest and of course your skill set, right? So they will know you for that, and they will say, you know what, we need somebody like you. The caveat, and that's something that I will put a word on being careful with this, is the symbolic capital that your PhD brings to these institutions. Institutions, it's very prestigious for institutions to hire a PhD, but the fact that they don't know your skill set, sometimes they don't know what to do with you. Also, it's advantageous to you because in a way, this institution they like your prestigious credentials and also the university that you are connected to. But it also could be a vulnerability because when you enter the institution as a community of practice, people within the team may be feeling threatened by you. I have seen students of PhD that have entered institutions that I work with, and they are unable to transfer that to become culturally competent in a new institution. They still bring these practices of being a student. And as a student, you are being told that you're wonderful sometimes, which is not necessarily true. So, or you don't know everything. So learn how to become part of that community, and also learn how to you bring value to the institution, and no saying, actually hire me because I'm important to you, but actually with your skill set, create initiatives, establish something that they haven't seen, but don't give them a lecture in linguistics. They don't need that. What you need to explain is what is it that you are doing and how could better processes of creating initiatives. And that's something that you learn over time, and that's how you build what I call your toolbox kit, because you then apply new skill set to your own training and experience.
Yeah, exactly. You raise a good point that the doctoral degree is not an end, it's a beginning of being a lifelong learner and of adapting to the new environments where you find yourself in your career. And you do have to learn how to balance the knowledge and the skills that you bring with how much you need to learn in a new community of practice in whatever sector that you go into. As far as the values and the skills that you bring as a linguist, Lisa Dashman has a question for all of you. Could you elaborate more on what it means to think like a linguist? How can you articulate what value linguists do bring in terms of how we are trained to think, and what are employers looking for in terms of what do they need us to solve? What is it about our training that is valuable? So maybe Hillary, it may have been you who mentioned that, like thinking like a linguist. What's really salient about that?
Yeah, I was wondering if I had said that phrase. Yeah, so right, so I'm a postdoc, which means I'm around a lot of people who have transitioned from the postdoc position onto permanent research at the lab. So, you know, with PhDs and masters and lots of different backgrounds, like a lot of computer science there. And so I was at lunch one time with you know, a group of coworkers, and I said, oh yeah, you know, like I think like a linguist. I guess this is a phrase I use not knowing it. And afterwards he's like, well, what does that mean? And he's like, oh, I have this problem I'm working on. Like, do you want to talk about it? And so I was like, yeah, well, here's what I would do. Like, so you want to outline like the situations like where you would need to like maneuver out of this. He's working on some like, you know, coding problem or a problem ultimately that he wants to code into a system. I said, so how about you, like, what I would do is I would delineate like all the times that you're going to, like all the different scenarios you could have, and then how you're going to work out of them. Because, you know, as a theoretical linguist, as a semanticist, what I do is I sit there and I'm like, what are all the possible ways you could use this word? And then let's come up with the meaning of this word behind all of these possible ways to use it. So I'm like, what are all the possible situations? And then how can you, you know, design a system that would get you out of these possible situations? And he's like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, that's not how I think about it at all. Like, you know, as a computer scientist, he would just want to go look at the data and then like mine the data for what's there. And I'm like, you don't need to mine the data. You can just make the data up. Like, that's what linguists are really good at, right? Because like we're used to it because we can produce all the language we want to study, you know, depending on what you want to study. So that is one way that I think I've noticed a difference in that. And there was another time where another coworker was like presenting on her research, and she's like, oh, I don't know how to like code. She's doing just more like psychology, but then of course you often are looking at psychology through language. So she's like, here's like the data people have produced, and you know, I don't know what to do with this. Like, are they using these verbs or not? I'm like, well, this is a case of ellipsis. Like, this is ellipsis every time. So, you know, this is a linguistic like fact that you can talk about. Like, so there's times where people are, a lot of times, you know, in technology or AI or whatever, people are looking at language to understand something, but they don't really know much about language. That wasn't the case with the first example I was talking about, but, you know, my thinking like a linguist of, you know, let's just talk about all these possible scenarios. That was a case where I felt like it helped. And then anytime people are looking at language, they often don't have terms for the phenomena in language that they're running across. And I had one other example, but oh, right. And another thing is too, sometimes people, they're like, they've been talking about these ideas and they're like, oh, I don't know, like sort of a theoretical framework I can fit these ideas into. And if you studied theoretical linguistics, you've studied lots of theories and you're like, this sounds a lot like optimality theory. Like, why don't you use that? Like theories that you've studied in linguistics, while they have been catered to and like built on language, a lot of times they are helpful in other domains. So those are a few examples of times that I felt like, yeah, I'm glad I know linguistics.
Oh, well, you know, That's so interesting. And speaking of knowing linguistics, what areas of specialization or coursework that you took have proven to be especially useful in the work that you do now? I think I'll turn to Tanner for this because you're closest to your coursework and can see how in this past year or so, what aspects, looking back, what has been most useful for you in your current position?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I started out as a contract language writer, and I've kind of taken on a few different roles. I helped do test development, and then I also mentioned some of the sociolinguistic qualitative research that I've been working on. And I think that for me, some of the most impactful courses that I draw from were the discourse analysis courses. So I think it's conversation and narrative, specifically to the MLC program. But the program, kind of like Hillary was mentioning, the courses that give you really clear linguistic concepts and linguistic phenomena that you can sort of learn and build research ideas around. And so I'm specifically thinking about a project that I've been working on at the LTAU, where I was able to draw upon the concepts of Gricean maxims, for example. We were able to talk about how that applies to the type of speaker that someone is, or how well they can speak a certain language. And I was able to take those concepts of Gricean maxims that I had learned in my undergrad, but we sort of built upon in my master's program. And we talked about how they sort of applied to this table, or I guess the tool that we've been using to analyze people. So any courses that really, I think all the courses that I took at Georgetown were helpful and effective, but the ones that really give you sort of like specific terms or theories or models that you can really use to apply to real world data. And that's something that I would suggest as well for anyone as a student right now in a master's program, bachelor's, whatever it may be. When you are in a course that you're taking, to do your best to, if you have a research project, for example, at the end of the semester, to really try to apply what you've learned to real world scenarios. Take data that exists in real world. I remember for one class, I took the victim impact statements from the Larry Nassar case, and I used that to do some analysis. So I would just suggest really trying to apply everything you can to real world scenarios, because not only do you have experiences that you can then draw upon when you do job interviews, but you can also see in real life how linguistic concepts can apply to real world data.
Great, thank you so much. We had a question come in too about, turning just from coursework preparation from now to degree preparation. Where do you see a doctoral degree being of use? Cecilia has pointed out that it can be advantageous, but certainly there are areas where it is not needed and sometimes not as advantageous. So what areas, positions in your organization do you see as requiring a PhD, or being, perfectly open to people with bachelor's training in linguistics? Maybe Hillary, I could start with you. You mentioned that your section chief had a PhD in linguistics. Certainly you do. What about other linguists who work in the Naval Research Lab?
Well, he has since retired, so I am now the only linguist there. But yeah, so definitely. So I'm a postdoc, so you have to have a PhD. The Naval Research Lab likes to have postdocs to kind of test people out, see if they like them. They're pretty nice because they're 3-year positions, which is a very generous time frame. And yeah, it's a way for them to find out if they like you and if they want to take you on full time as a proper government employee, because right now I'm a contractor. And it's also a way for you to figure out, do you want to be here, long term? So they sometimes will hire people not going through the postdoc process. So you could have a master's and and get a job there. I think it would be a lot harder as a linguist to get a linguist with a master's to get a full-time job bypassing any sort of postdoc, because I think just because it's not as well understood, people aren't as confident that they would know how to use you. And so PhD does come with more clout, you know, at a research institution like this. So yeah, I need it for my postdoc. At Google, I would say that a bachelor's was fine. There were plenty of people there who just had bachelor's. I think a few had masters. At the time I started, I was the first PhD, but then other PhDs came. But I mean, the real question is not, should I get a PhD? Will that help me get a job? The question is, do you want to get a PhD? And afterwards, you find the jobs that fit with that. Because I think, you know, what a range of, we'll hear throughout all of these talks is that you can get a job with whatever your degree is, and it's going to fit that degree. So get a PhD if you want it.
Yeah, and that also comes with certain questions of return on investment and years away from the workforce, and so many personal questions that you have to balance. You know, Tanner, I think for your entry into FBI, into federal agency, what degree level is necessary?
So for my specific job, the contract language rater, I don't think they have a specific degree that you need to have. I know that all of the contract language raters have some sort of language background. So one was an English professor, one was an editor. I obviously am a linguist, but I don't think there's any hard requirements for the degrees. But I do know that when you're looking at FBI jobs or the USA jobs as well, they will very clearly outline what sort of education and training you're supposed to have. So it's pretty straightforward when you're looking at applications on a government's website, what they want you to have.
Yep, very straightforward. Cecilia, how about in your office, in your first position, what would you say were the educational requirements for many of those jobs in advocacy and working with the communities in Washington, D.C.?
I don't think, and I think, I mean, I'm trying to answer this question this way. I think the degree of PhD gives you certain skills that you have honed over a longer period of time. So you have skills that are very important, such as good writing. I mean, maybe a little bit too high-end kind of writing, but you also know how to do research. You know how to resolve a problem. You have finished a very long process of putting together a huge research project. You are very much committed to work, and you can deliver hopefully on time. I think in the institutions that I have been working, which is government, the local government, and at the level of the executive office, they do value the skill set, and it could be found within a master's degree or a PhD. In my personal experience, PhDs, individuals that are doing some sort of work, are able to implement initiatives where they have a long-term kind of process. One of the things that you learn really quickly is to acquire additional skills such as management, project management, contract management, administration, and what is that, employee kind of management, right? So there is no per se, actually, I've been working for 16 years outside academia. I have met a good number of people that have PhDs, and they are very much implementing new initiatives, and they bring theories. A lot of human resources people have PhDs, and they get into very specific kind of human behavior and so forth. What else I could say about it? The other thing is the fact that you really, the difficult thing is to not lecture. I mean, to get away from being a professor, but actually apply the theories and methodologies that you know, and make it accessible to them. In Bakhtinian terms, you are learning social languages. So you go from academia, which is, you know, we speak with certain specific terminology. You are not going to say, okay, let me show you speech act theory, right? No, you don't. You just explain the phenomenon and you say there are these tools within linguistics that could address the situation, and this is how I did it. And in that way, you also share your knowledge, but you become valuable to be able to analyze something very specific. I was listening to Hillary. I never had that experience of really applying very concrete, you know, semantic terminology or anything like that. But I can give you an example of an application of what it was, ethnographic work and analysis of human interaction by observing, applying ethnography for about 7 months and looking at particular sites in government to see how they serve individuals that didn't speak the language. So I sent my interns who were anthropology and linguistic students. I have master's and PhD students to do ethnographic work. And with that information over a period of 7 months, we were able to modify the site to follow how people actually behave and know how the institution have organized the site or the setting. And then we were able to implement signage in language to be able to make sure that the individual did what the institution wanted to do, to take action. And just in that, I applied ethnography, I applied interactional sociolinguistics, I applied narrative analysis, discourse analysis, and visual semiotics. But I didn't present it like that. I was able to present the actual result just with the information that the institution needed to do and had to implement it. So when you bring these tools, I think in my experience, people really get to see PhDs, in my case, linguist. I can tell you that after my 5th year in another department, the Office on Asian Pacific Islander Affairs, which also serves individuals that are Asian immigrants, they requested to have a PhD in linguistics for the language access coordinator after they got to see the work that was able to do with the agencies. So in a way, you also see yourself as a door opener for others. And again, as I said at the beginning, Skolon was so influential in my life. And he always said to me, be responsible with your training. Bring it about and keep it with it, because institutions frequently may just justify some things because you have a PhD, but you are responsible to bring what you really know and to be ethical about it.
Very good point about ethics and making sure that you can stand behind the work that you do, making sure that you fit with that job. Can I ask, can you think back to some key terms? We're talking about how you shouldn't lecture, you shouldn't use a lot of linguistic terminology when you are describing what you can do or the value that you bring. Can you think of some almost translations of key terms that might be useful, of some of our technical terms in linguistics that will translate to work in other areas in the federal government? Ways that you would write about your skills on your resume. What were some ways that you reframed your resume to highlight your training, your background? You think back to that, even though Cecilia didn't necessarily have the most typical application process and she was offered a job on the spot. But, you know, one of the points there is that you can always ask for more time, never feel pressure to accept a job on the spot should you be so lucky. Ask for time, that's perfectly fine. But as far as reframing a resume, what can you recommend to some of the students and faculty listening?
I might give it a shot, and just because I've had experience hiring, follow the practices of the institution. And that's what I mean as taking this as an ethnographic task. a lot of organizations, especially the large ones, as I said, they have human resources and they have a department that is called talent acquisition. In talent acquisition, they have what they call recruiters. And they have different levels of individuals that will able to identify what they call talent. Use platforms like LinkedIn. Actually, I was surprised when I actually started working at Metro, and those people that I mentioned that are departments specifically to scout talent, they will look into your LinkedIn account and they will reach out to you. So don't ignore them because they are paying attention to you. So this is what I would recommend. In general, the practice is that you have a resume, right? You may have an academic resume, keep it, because hopefully, even if you work in outside the university walls, you will be continuing active in terms of researching, investigation, and so forth. So keep that one. And then create one specific to the business or the sector that you're working or you're applying to. And as I said, this is from my experience as a hiring individual. But be very specific to what the job description stipulates. Again, ethnographic thinking. I'm sure many of you, when you see those applications, especially those descriptions of what is very intimidating, the format in terms of the requirements and the scope of work. There are many positions that require 10 years of experience. So getting early involved in those areas helps a lot. Even if you don't get paid, you have the experience. So have those copies, but also use those platforms as LinkedIn as your portfolio, where you put everything, where you put your initiatives, where you can link to, if you did a video, if you did an analysis, if you did some sort of ethnographic research, so that those particular recruiters can go and look for you there. Those recruiters are your gatekeepers. Actually, those are the ones that are going to send me 10 people to interview. I have no control of what I would like to, I don't go and recruit myself. So in that sense, be honest in terms of what you bring to the position. Choose a position that you can actually do. So if you see 10 years experience and you just graduated, don't even try, you know. And so, but because of the ethnographic work that you're doing, hopefully you are able to connect to one of those individuals and ask all the questions you want. So you know what is the process. You know how to deconstruct that particular overwhelming description, job description. You know the format of the resume if that's what they want. So in that sense, you make it easier for the person that is looking at your resume. I remember in graduate school, I was always told, you know, engagement in the first paragraph. So imagine I'm traveling, my mentor always said, I'm traveling from here to Alaska and I need to read 20 papers. So how do you engage me? It has to be, how do you engage me, right? In the first paragraph. So make it succinct, clear. By that moment that you actually submit those kind of documents for applying for a job, you already know what to do and how to do it. To me, that's always wonderful. I see people with PhDs and they have a wonderful presentation on themselves and the resume, and I immediately want to know what the person would like to do in my unit. So,
Yes.
Yeah, I think to answer that question, Alex, for me, I was just looking back at some of my cover letters, and I used words like qualitative analysis, research, deep data analysis. It really depends on the field that you're and the job you're applying to. But I think kind of reiterating a theme that's popped up in this panel so far is you really want to look at the job you're applying to, because virtually every job will have a pretty in-depth description, and use your language skills to tailor your abilities and your experiences using a specific verbiage that was in the job description. That's something that I would really suggest. So if the job asks for someone who is detail oriented and is able to conduct data or research on complex data, use words like complex data, deep data analysis, detail-oriented, really tailor all of your application material to the specific verbiage of the job post, because it's just going to help you get your foot in the door. So I think beyond just kind of finding keywords that you can sort of blast to every job description, really take some time to customize and tailor your application material to specific jobs.
Exactly. So, you know, the theme here too is that part of thinking like a linguist is really being sensitive to language use by the specific audience that you are trying to speak with, the audience of your future employer or of those recruiters. You need to use the language that they use, pick up on the key terms that they're using frequently, and see how you can translate your own skills using the terms that they use, so that they will recognize you. They will recognize that you have the skills that they're looking for. If in fact you do. Again, this is all, you know, being truthful and honest about what you bring to the table. I'd like to take the last, 3 minutes of the panel to just kind of see if you have any last words of advice for those who are listening, students and faculty who are curious about finding these jobs and positioning themselves for jobs in the government, federal agency area. Hillary, may I start with you and see what you might leave our audience with today?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of uncharted territory was how I felt when I was looking. But, take that as a challenge and a way to have fun. You a lot of times might get to be the person who tells hundreds of people what it is to be a linguist. So, and we know that linguistics is an incredibly broad, diverse field with, any linguist is going to give you a different answer of what linguistics is. But you get to be the person who's their spokesman. So have fun with that. And yeah, I mean, find ways to build your confidence in what you know. For me, like I said, having a contract position at Google for a year was enough to give me confidence to start kind of cold calling people and telling them what I know. So find ways to, understand what you know, how it fits into the scope of what is being done out there in the workplace, and have fun finding a good fit.
Great, thank you. Tanner, do you have any sort of last words of advice or something that you don't want to forget to say to the audience today?
Yeah, sure. I would just say, especially for those graduate students who are in the last semester of their program and kind of scrambling for a job or kind of what to do next. I know that can be, I've been there recently. I know that feeling. I would just say really maximize the opportunities that you have like today to hear from people in different fields, to just kind of look at the different ways that you can use linguistics in the outside of academia. The job that I currently have, I was never particularly interested in language assessment, but my last year, really, I just went to a ton of networking events and panels and presentations, just to really network as best I can. And I know for some people, especially me, that can kind of be tough. It's hard to put yourself out there, be looking for jobs and things like that. But really just maximizing the opportunities you have to hear about different opportunities in different workplaces. And then always, if you can, make a personal connection with the person, whether that's through LinkedIn or an email or something, because you never know what job options are going to jump out to you. And you might be like me and never have thought you'd work in language assessment, but it ended up you working in language assessment, and then you're able to find ways to apply what you love about linguistics to the job that you have. So I would say always, embrace those opportunities when they come, even if it can feel a little uncomfortable or awkward at times.
Embrace the awkward, embrace the uncomfortable, get comfortable with it, put up a LinkedIn profile and reach out to people, start networking and building relationships. Cecilia, do you have just a couple words to close us?
Yes, I actually have an advice. Connect to the university, connect to your alma mater. Georgetown has been wonderful. I have been able to maintain a foot here and there. I teach there. Sometimes I'm invited, which is nice because I bring the experience to the students. But I know for Georgetown, they have the thing called Hoya Gateway, which connects alumni with the students that graduate. So take advantage of those resources that you may not know exist. With Georgetown too is the Masters in Language and Culture, I think, which Alex leads. So those are organizations or departments that actually invite people like us to come and present and make connections. So don't forget your university from where you graduated. Maintain that relationship because they are the ones that will bring to you people like us.
Exactly. Most every university will have alumni associations that provide career resources well beyond graduation for every stage of your career search. So you can often access videos of career experts and coaches and people in the fields that you're interested in on YouTube. Those resources are available to you. You can also network with alumni, as Cecilia mentions. You can find those alumni through Gateway, that program that's available to many universities. You can also network through LinkedIn. Find your alumni connections through LinkedIn, search for them and reach out to them. Alumni love to reach a hand back and help other alumni. So I'm going to leave us here. I want to thank all of our panelists so much for your generosity with your time and energy on a weekend. I really appreciate the tips and strategies and experiences that you shared today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.